what circumstances would we use coroutines? A very common use case, so you can use it for the sequence builder. That's obviously quite tidy. So if you have something like that, I'd say use coroutines. They are not expensive, they're really cheap to use. There's no reason not to use them in that particular case. And for the sequence function, you don't even need the library. This is part of the standard library because it doesn't use most of what coroutines does. The coroutines library provides a lot of extra capabilities. But in the context of Android, when would you use it? When you do things like you want to make a network request and then you want to do something with that network request, it's a very common way of doing this. So coroutines, any time where you need to send some work and then you want to do something with the work when it's done. A coroutine makes it possible to do that in a very natural way, rather than having to do all these callbacks. So if you have something where you want to do callbacks, when you want to make a network request, you want to hit it. Remember, in Android, even accessing a database should not actually be done using the main UI thread. So in Kotlin, a very common use case or in Android, a very common use case for coroutines would be to replace a lot of the async task implementations, where you do something in the background so that it doesn't interrupt your UI doesn't become unresponsive. In particularly when we have this with context that I showed you in the example, what it allows you to do is very quickly say, okay, do this in a UI thread, do this on an IO thread, do this in a background thread. So basically IO and background are different because an the IO pool will create more threads from the expectations that it just needs to, most of the threads will be spending most of their time waiting for something to happen externally, so being suspended, paused, whereas a background thread is supposed to be doing actual work. So if you have heavy work to do, that's another one. I have one of the things I have an example of, I don't actually use coroutines, but if they were available when I implemented that, I would have. Now I use some really hackish way of doing the same thing, is I have an algorithm that allows me to lay out a diagram. And I want, partially for testing, partially for that, I want to be able to actually see every move that the algorithm makes to the elements in the diagram. So when it moves something, I want to be able to see that. So I would now use coroutines to basically just in that say, okay, now inform whoever wants to watch it that this change has happened, and then when it's ready, it can say, okay, I'm ready, I've received this. Basically the same way that our sequence generator or sequence builder works. So those are kind of contexts where you want to use coroutines. Anytime where you want to be able to suspend your execution and then pick it up somewhere later. But write your code as if that was just one thing. So you can think in a sequential way, but it's executed in a non-sequential way. That's kind of and in a way that you suspend halfway through, so as chopped up bits. I think that's the way to think about that.